This is Jeremy Martin, Vice President for Energy and Sustainability at the Institute of the Americas, and we're very pleased to have the latest installment of our energy webinar series. And today we will be talking about Ecuador, and the title of José Antonio's presentation from the ministry is Ecuador's Energy Sector Reorientation. And we're very happy about this opportunity to talk about Ecuador because at the Institute it has been a few years since we've spent a good bit of time looking at Ecuador. And we're very pleased as we've been engaging with the new government, which I guess is not so new anymore. President Lenin Moreno took over in May of 2017. So it's I guess after a year is no longer a new government, the relatively new government. And so there's a lot of things happening institutionally. There's a lot of things happening in terms of investment outreach, investment outlook in the energy sector across all segments of the energy sector. And so we're really pleased to have this opportunity to hear from the ministry and José Antonio Cepeda as to exactly what those institutional changes are, what the government intends to do with the energy sector, and particularly some of the direct investment opportunities in the coming months and some of what's already transpired since President Moreno took over. Just a couple of quick housekeeping. For those of you who've joined us before, you know that we'll have the formal presentation by José Antonio, followed by a question and answer session that will be moderated by yours truly online, and we'll use the chat function. And so simply type in your questions in the chat bar and the bar at the bottom, and we'll take those through the course of the presentation. And after José Antonio completes the entire presentation, we'll have about 15 minutes or so for questions and answers. So we look forward to you participating in that. And the final note on that is don't hesitate. Excuse me, please go ahead and weigh in, put your questions, comments throughout the course of the presentation. You don't have to wait. That function is live there. So I want to quickly present our speaker today, and we're very happy that, like I said, we've been able to engage in the last few months to have a little bit more dialogue with the energy officials in Ecuador to learn about some of the work they're doing and their priorities for the sector. And we're being joined today by José Antonio Cepeda, who is an advisor to the Minister Perez of Ecuador's Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources, which he'll talk a little bit about the evolution of the ministry, which is in a sense a merging of several areas of energy in Ecuador institutionally into one ministry that is now headed by Carlos Perez and José Antonio works for. José Antonio is an engineer. He has a degree in engineering from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany. I also want to mention he has a deep background in finance. He worked for many years in the finance arena and finance sector before joining the government last year. He's currently Ecuador's representative to OPEC, and he's also a board member of the International Energy Forum. So he's extremely involved in terms of Ecuador's internal domestic energy issues, but also where Ecuador is participating internationally, whether it be OPEC or the International Energy Forum, which, by the way, are two very interesting, distinctive organizations. So without any further ado, I would like to invite José Antonio to go ahead and present, and we'll, like I said, wait at the end for his for the question and answer session. So José Antonio, thank you so much. I'll turn it over to you now, and I will mute my mic to reduce any feedback. Thanks for joining us.
Jeremy, thank you for the introduction. Really kind words of your part. So just as a way of starting, we are really looking forward to this kind of events that help us promote Ecuador and showcase the progress that have been made regarding the sector reorientation and also the attraction of investments. As you say, I work in the ministry as advisor of Minister Perez, and I'm mostly involved with the international things and also with the strategical planning of the sector and investment attraction. So thank you very much everyone who is joining us, and yourself and the Institute of the Americas. Really looking forward to have this kind of a stepping stone for more collaboration together and looking ways to foster dialogue and promote investment. So with that said, so maybe just I will get started with the presentation, and then afterwards we can follow up with the Q&A as we proposed in the beginning. So as you probably know, Ecuador is going a shift in the government. We are trying to reorganize the sectors, and we are going from many ministries to more consolidated entities, and in that case, the Ministry of Hydrocarbons has been joined with the Ministry of Energy and Electricity and with the Ministry of Mining. And the three ministries together are now the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources. The minister is Minister Perez, who his background is in the private sector. He has worked in Halliburton for many years, which is an oil service company, and he has major experience in the oil sector. Funny thing is he's actually an electrical engineer, so in that sense he also knows about the electric sector, and now we are working our way into the mining sector. And what we have seen is that once you join many sectors, what you have is that there are some good things from one sector that you can transfer to the other or transfer to the other, and there are some good things from the other sector that you can transfer to the other. So what we are managing to do, what we are trying to do is look at these synergies and look at processes that we can build in new sectors in order to streamline the business operations in Ecuador and enhance the cooperations with the private companies. In that sense, we have the support of the Inter-American Development Bank. They are looking to do a consulting job with us in the new ministry, and they will be looking into things like strategical planning, like what is our vision or mission, and those kind of things, which are important to have kind of a blueprint to where we want to go. So without further ado, so maybe the first slide that you can see here is just kind of put Ecuador into context. We have over 16 million people in the country. Our main currency is dollar, which is good because the dollar-based economy helps us isolate from these devaluation problems that some of our neighbor countries have, and it makes also easier to do business in Ecuador. And then here we have other facts that you can look at. I will not get into detail, but just to have like a context about Ecuador, the size of the economy, and so on. So the main question that we always try to answer is, why should you invest in Ecuador? Why should you trust in Ecuador? And we see Ecuador as a premier getaway into business in South America because of the dollar-based economy, because of we have developed infrastructure, we have done a lot of investment in roads, airports, telecommunication, education, health. So it's a country which is developing fast and which has a lot of benefits for companies who want to join us. There is also another thing. Ecuador is a small country, so you have logistical advantages. You don't have these great distances between places in Ecuador, so in that sense it's easier to have a business here. And although we are so small, we are really rich in natural resources. We have a lot of mining potential, hydrocarbons potential, water potential for power generation and other things, agriculture, and also tourism. The standard of living is high in Ecuador. The security is also high. I mean, if you go by the street or you have your normal day-to-day, you wouldn't have any problem. You have to be mindful like in any other country, but we don't have terrorism, we don't have this kind of groups that install panic in the country. And we are also working in tax incentives and enhancing those, looking into ways to foster in investments and looking into ways to attract new business partners to the country. Also, we are working in the bilateral investment treaties for investment protection, but I will go into that in the next slide. So the policies in the energy sector and non-renewable natural resources it's easy. In the past, we have seen that Ecuador has been an economy that was mainly driven by state spending, and we are trying to shift that perspective to have more as an inclusive economy where the private sector has an important role to play. And we, in that sense, what we are looking at is what operation, what type of business, what type of investment makes more sense for the private sector than for the state government. And we try to leverage those those synergies and take advantage of those and build a more diverse income source for the country and more diverse players in each sector. We are also promoting transparent negotiations. We try to do mainly open tenders with all the information. Proof of that is the tender that we just launched yesterday. I will talk more about that in the following slides, but we are seeing an uptick in investments, and we are seeing good feedback from our business partners or companies present in Ecuador and companies that have interest in joining us. And the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Investments and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is currently working on the bilateral investment treaties, which is also of interest for the companies just to enhance the protection that they have to their investments. Okay, so now the hydrocarbon sector. As you probably know, Ecuador is a part of OPEC and the OPEC national representative, and in that sense, we monitor every month, every day, which are the new trends in the market and how is the supply-demand balance for oil. According to that, oil will be needed until 2040. It will be an important part of the energy mix. So we see oil as a cornerstone in the development of Ecuador. We are an oil country, and we are also trying to do new income sources, but not disregarding the needed development for oil. Ecuador plan is to increase its production to 540,000 barrels per day until the end of 2018. And this increase is in accordance with the OPEC new policy regarding production quotas and so on. And the goal of the minister and of the government of President Moreno is to reach 700 barrels per day until 2021, and for that we have to do a couple of investments, but that's our goal, and that's what we are working hard on. Ecuador has a huge hydrocarbons potential. According to a British Petroleum report from 2016, we have over 8 billion barrels of recoverable resources. And the minister always likes to joke about that 20 years ago he heard that Ecuador has 20 more years of oil, and we are now 20 years later, and we also are hearing that Ecuador has 20 more years of oil. So we are really blessed with the oil in the country, and we see a huge potential in increasing production and also booking new reserves that will help sustain the national economy. Currently, I have here the breakdown of production. So the national production in August was 530,000 barrels per day. Petroamazonas, which is the state company, produces about 413,000 barrels per day, and the private sector produces around 117,000 barrels per day. This production of Block 43 ITT is 72,000 barrels per day. ITT is the block that is it's in the near of the Yasuní National Park, and it's one of our main new blocks that we are developing, and we are being mindful about the development in this block because of the environmental concerns that are surrounding that. As probably most emerging market economies have faced in the past problems with fiscal balance and so on, Ecuador has also faced that, but the oil sector has produced revenues higher than we expected or that we budgeted in our national budget. So this is the slide. We budgeted the revenues for 2018 with around oil prices from 40.9, and now we are seeing prices of 70. So that gives us a little bit of air and help us also promote the government agenda of social agenda and also the productive agenda and the energy agenda. As I said, one of our main oil fields, oil block, is the ITT. And in this oil field, we are really mindful about the environment because it's a really biodiverse field, and it's nearby the Yasuní National Park, which is highly regarded in the world as one of the pristine places for biodiversity, flora and fauna. So from the 1 million hectares of the park, we just use about 130 hectares, and we use offshore technology onshore. So for the people that are not familiar with those terms, we use the technology that you use in oil development in the sea onshore, just to be more environmental conscious. We have a policy zero discharge to environment. We monitor the flora and fauna, and we have a plan for solving any inconvenience. So it's really mindful, the development, and many people have visited the blog, and they are really amazed with what we have done there. New rounds that we are looking to tender. The Intercampus Round is the round that I was talking earlier. We launched the tender yesterday. We have seen a lot of good feedback from the companies. This tender is really important because it's the first new oil tender that comes with the production sharing agreement after about 10 years that it hasn't been in place. And for oil companies, the production sharing agreement is more attractive just because they can book reserves, they can be more certain about payments, and they can leverage those securities out in order to financing the development needed. In Q4 of 2018, we are also looking into two possible rounds, the Intercampus 2 round and the Suroriente round. The Suroriente round is mainly exploratory, and it's in the border with Peru. We see a lot of potential there given the findings that we have seen in Peru, and as the minister likes to say, oil reservoirs no borders, so we expect to have a lot of success there. Other projects that we have in the pipeline in the oil sector are Monteverde. This is an import facility, and we are looking to
José Antonio? José Antonio, are you still there? I think we lost your audio for a second. Sorry about that. We'll try and reconnect. Bear with us for a second. And seems that we've lost connection, unfortunately, with José Antonio from Quito. We'll try and reconnect as soon as possible. Hold on, please. Oh, José Antonio, we cannot hear you. If you Well, in the meantime, let me, I'll take advantage of this to jump ahead to a couple of promotions of the Institute. Why not? This is the advertising segment of the webinar. And I want to make folks aware of a program we're running next week in Costa Rica and San Jose. It is the first formal program of our Energy Transition Initiative, which for those of you who've been following the Institute hopefully are aware of, the launch in June of a new Institute initiative within the Energy and Sustainability Program that will be looking and diving deeper into issues surrounding deployment of renewable energy, distributed energy resources, and some of the issues surrounding those, and particularly as they pertain to what we call the energy transition, this transformation. So we're very pleased to have the first formal activity under that initiative next week in Costa Rica, focused on Central America, the Central America Energy Transition Roundtable. We've got great level of participation from government and private sector across Central America. Ministers of Energy from Guatemala, Panama, El Salvador, and senior officials from Costa Rica are all joining us for that. So we please make sure, if it's not too late, to mark the calendars. And then we also have a couple of webinars coming up.
Buenos días.
I think we are reconnecting.
Hola.
So.
Hola, buenos días.
Sí, por favor, adelante.
Ya, estamos llevando de Ecuador nuevamente conferencia con José Antonio Cepeda. Comunicamos, por
Sí,
favor.
perfecto, gracias.
Gracias.
And also, just to make sure you mark your calendars for
Hello, can you hear me
other
now?
events, but let's reconnect. Jose Antonio, welcome back.
Okay.
I was just pausing during the pause. I was talking about some of the upcoming Institute of Americas programs, but you were talking about some of the specific projects, so I'll let you pick back up again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to all about the connecting issues, but we are back now. So we are having major projects that are like strategic projects for us in the oil sector. One of those is Monteverde, which is import facilities. We are looking into enhance that. Given the geographic location of the import facilities, we have seen a lot of interest from many companies into invest in that location that will not only serve Ecuador, but it will be actually a main port for the region, for the South Pacific coast. So in Monteverde, we are looking into three things: the import of clean products, mainly diesel and naphtha, for the demand of clean products in the South region, a regional hub for the Pacific coast, and also we are looking into diversifying our energy matrix in Ecuador and looking into the import of LNG. The other project that we have been promoting is the Manabí Refinery, which is a refinery for the Ecuadorian crude, a high conversion refinery with a capacity of 300,000 barrels per day. We are looking to do it with a private investor, which would be a business partner to the state, and we would help satisfy the need for clean products in the country, which we actually import nowadays. Then we have the sulfur plant in the Esmeraldas refinery just for processing H2S and looking into building some sulfuric acid. Full improvements, we have a lot of residue in the Esmeraldas refinery, so we're looking into the possibilities of building something for more conversion, for increasing the conversion on the refinery and getting more clean products out of that refinery that we have. And then we have some interesting projects, energy efficiency projects, which are mainly the electrification of the hydrocarbon sector. So now that we are one ministry, what we try to do is to electrify the hydrocarbon sector and generate savings for that. For example, like electrification of the main oil pipeline and building the power transmission lines to the oil fields. Then, if we go to the power sector, the energy matrix of Ecuador is really interesting because around 83% of our energy is done by hydropower, which makes us one of the more environmental friendly energy matrix in the region. We have a huge hydro potential, but we have to be mindful into balancing hydropower with other energy sources which help us increase the stability of the system. We have available power compared with our demand, so in that sense we are ahead of the curve, but we have to plan every year to see how we expand our power generation in order to meet future demand. We see a growth in energy demand of around 4% per year. It changes dependable of the conditions, economic conditions, and so on. But we see that kind of growth, so we have to come with new projects that help satisfy that increased demand. So in the generation project, we have three big projects: Coca-Cola Sinclair, which is around 1,500 megawatts of power, Sopladora and Mandariaco. Those are already in operation, and we are coming online with new hydro plants: Quijos, Mazar, Cibaltagua, San Francisco, Antoache, Pilatón. We also have a combined cycle in Machala, that's mainly with natural gas that we we get the natural gas from a gas field that we have in the coast or only gas field, but we are looking into ways to increase the gas import, maybe joining with the Peruvian fields of gas and then importing it for Machala power. And then we have also some wind generation in Villanaco, which is actually has won many international recognition because of the utilization of that plant is really high for a wind farm. As I said, we plan ahead in our energy sector in the electricity side, and we have the Plan Maestro de Electricidad, which help us see which investments are needed to satisfy the future demand. And then you can see in this slide which new projects we are looking into building just to go with the demand. So we have more than $6 billion in planned investments and a capacity addition of 4,700 megawatts between 2018 and 2025, and those are unconventional renewables, mine hydroelectric, geothermal energy, and also combined cycles, and the hydropower, the large ones. So those are the new investments. And in the idea of the electrification of the hydrocarbon sector, what we are going to do is to join the oil fields with the main national grid, which will help us display around 300 megawatts of thermal generation, which was mainly diesel, and that would generate around $300 million annual savings for the country, plus the environmental benefit in not burning diesel but using hydroelectricity for the oil field. So we are really mindful in increasing the sustainability of the hydrocarbon sector, of the mining sector, and of the country as a whole. Another initiative that is interesting is CINEA, which is a regional initiative which aims to have a regional grid which joins Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Bolivia. We are in the early stages of CINEA. We have the support of the Inter-American Development Bank, and we are working mainly on 3 regulations: the operation regulations, which regulate how you operate, which specification does have to have the lines and so on; commercial regulations, which regulate how you do commerce between countries and the region, and we have to also work into a regional operator, which helps us assess how is the energy dispatch, where is it allocated, and in what order. So we are first in stage 1, short-term market institutionality. We have some contracts with Colombia. Sometimes we sell our energy to Colombia when they have a need. They sell also energy to us and also to Peru. But we have to further work on that and enhance the mutual benefit of this regional grid, which would lower the generation cost for all the countries involved. Then afterwards, we have to be able to have financial contracts between the agents, like more long-term contracts. And the stage 3 would have to be that we can achieve to be a base generator of power in another country. So, for example, if Colombia or Peru has a need of 100 megawatts of available generation, then they can reach a contract with Ecuador, would provide those base energy for those countries. So that would be the 3rd stage. And in Ecuador, we have also another gem of the world, which is the Galapagos Islands. So we are mindful of the importance of that, not only Ecuador, but for the world. And in that sense, we are working to have a sustainable generation matrix in Galapagos with the Plan Zero Fossil Fuel strategy. Here you have some of the initiatives that we have in place, but we are looking into enhance the studies. We are looking into find some cooperations for the Galapagos Island and also work on the demand side, because on the one hand, you have to optimize the generation side just to be sustainable, but you have also to work into the demand side of the equation, like trying to use EVs in Galapagos maybe, or another kind of energy, and looking how we can do. The vision is to have Galapagos as the first sustainable place on Earth, that it doesn't need to burn any fuel from the mainland, it's sustainable by itself. So that's the big goal. Then our main objective is to open the energy sector and the natural resources sector to private investment. So this is the way that it works in the electricity sector. So you go to the master plan of electrification. You can see it in the website of the ministry, which this plan sets which projects have to come online and when. Afterwards, the ministry decides, okay, can I implement these projects by myself, or can I tender these projects out to companies, or can I do a concession regarding these projects? So that's the process that the projects have to do. So if anybody is interested in looking at what projects we have in the pipeline for the electricity sector, you only have to go to the Plan Maestro de Electrificación and look at what we are aiming to do. And just to close things up, we are also in charge of the mining sector. We have a huge potential in that area. We have seen a lot of good discoveries, and we have the first generation mining project like Fruta del Norte with landing gold, and is around $1,240 million in investment. And then we are working into bringing those productions online, being mindful of the environment. And afterwards, we are also working in the second generation mining projects, which are actually bigger than these projects. And that would be that. So we have a lot on our plate, and we have a lot of sectors, and we have to work daily into getting the lessons learned from the one sector across the other. And we are looking into to also enhance our strategical planning, have a more transparent communication system, and also have all the information available for the private sector, so that they can make the decision regarding which project they are interested in, and they can join us. So that would be my presentation, and then if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer those.
José Antonio, thank you very much for that comprehensive discussion. There's a lot of questions I think that could be had. Let me just remind everyone about the how we would do the questions. I think earlier I wrote the word chat in the chat bar. I meant to write the word questions. So pose your questions here. Let me start with something just to make absolutely certain about sort of the institutional. So the government, just to be clear, you indicated, and we see on the screen, the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources. So that process of merging, for lack of a better word, all of the various ministries into one ministry that covers all of the segments, as you went through in your presentation, the very wide range of segments of the energy sector, but also mining. So that's been fully established, and Minister Perez is in charge of all of those segments of Ecuador's energy portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, as of yesterday or the first of this month, we are one ministry, the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources. President Moreno has appointed Minister Perez as the head of this new ministry. And what we are doing now is, as always, looking at how is it working now, the new ministry, and looking into ways of streamlined processes, reduce costs, and so on. And that's where the Inter-American Development Bank is helping us with one company that is in charge of that. But the ministries are already joined. The sectors are all under the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources, and Minister Perez is the head of that ministry.
there's a question, but before we get to that, I wanted to go back to something you talked about. I think that's interesting and actually relates a little bit to the first question that we have from Teo. You talked about the commitment of this government, of the Moreno administration, to increase oil production to 700,000 barrels a day by the end of 2021, which I think is the end of his term. Can you talk a little bit more about how that goal will be achieved? There's a lot of targets like that set across many countries. This is not some of the numbers we've seen in other markets, but nevertheless, it's a pretty sizable target, a pretty sizable growth. Help us understand the fields and how the contracts and how investment will be utilized to capture that increased production.
Yeah, sure. So first, the IDT block has a huge potential. We believe it will really have a peak production of around 250,000 barrels per day. So that's a main contributor for the increase. And then also the new production sharing contracts, we believe it is a good pair with the geological potential of Ecuador. Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'm hearing myself. Okay. So the production sharing contract will help increase the private companies' participation in the country. And if you look at the numbers of Ecuador, our recovery rate in the oil fields is pretty low. And it's not because we are not able to recover more. It's because we are seeing many opportunities where it's cheaper to get the oil out. So with more investments, it's not easy, but it's doable to increase the recovery rates, which would translate in also an increase in the production. The Suroriente round is also a huge contributor to that. It's difficult to assess how much barrels we can get from that because it's exploratory and it will take place afterwards that the president's term ends, but it's also a thing that will make the sector sustainable. So just to summarize, it's a mix of more private investment thanks to the production sharing contracts and the new rules, increased capex in the national oil company for the ITT block and also for enhancing the recovery rate, and the other tenders that we have already closed in the past, which amount to committed investments of $2.2 billion.
So no, I mean, ITC has been for many and definitely remains a significant piece of the portfolio. So thank you for confirming and adding to that. So the following question, or the next question, I should say, has to do with the refinery. And you talked about the plan with the Manabi refinery. And so there's a series of questions that Teo has posted here in terms of, is it self-financed? Will the government promote it through the ministry, or is it Petroecuador or Petroamazonas? And if it's not self-financed, who finances it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the refinery project is a really important project for the country. We have talked with a lot of investors and companies that are able to operate those kind of projects. We have seen that the refining business, the downstream business, is a business where the state is really bad at that. We mainly lose money with that kind of business. So what we are looking is into companies that are efficient and are able to seize that opportunity. We have a pen-out demand in Ecuador for products which we are currently importing. So that's the business case. The refinery comes in, we sell the refinery their oil, and they sell us the products that we need for the country, and the surplus that can export freely. We have talked with some interesting parties, from China, some Indian companies, and also some U.S. companies. The framework would be a BOT, where the company does the investment and the country commits to buy the products that are the output of the refinery. Now we are waiting for a presidential decree which will launch the tendering process, and then we have to wait and see if there are companies who present offers that are acceptable for the state and are also beneficial for the state, and we also have to wait to see if the investors are interested in being part of the project.
Yeah, I'll pose a question to Teo to put on the chat whether he thinks there's a big debate in Mexico right now that most of us are listening to and watching about the viability of new refining projects right now in 2018, 2019, going forward. So, but let me move on to switching gears a little bit, Jose Antonio, to the electric sector. And Leonel wanted to clarify with you that the way when he saw the slide where you presented the electric sector expansion plan, there did not appear to be any wind or solar projects in that expansion plan. Is that correct? There, perfect. So maybe talk a little bit more specifically about renewables in the.
Yeah, sure. I mean, our main focus of ours is to complementary. So our hydro-based energy has some months of the year where there are not many rains. So we have to complement it with thermal energy and also with projects like wind and solar. So if you look in this plan, this is this block, which is around 200 megabytes. This is called Energías renovables no convencionales, which are non-conventional renewable energy, and that is mainly wind and solar. And then you have also this geothermal block, which is geothermal energy. So we are contemplating that, but it's always a function of complementary, which the price per kilowatt hour. So we have to see which are the cheaper energy and see when they are competitive. So we have plans for incorporating solar and wind. We have already some wind in place, and that's that. But as I said, they have to have to see which is the cheaper way that we can generate energy, also being mindful of the environment. Actually, Select, which is our public company, it does this generation plan with, I believe, with a linear optimization, and they see when are the best years to come, which kind of energy online, dependable on energy price, capex, complementary, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much for clarifying. And so when you talk about the non-conventional renewable energy, different countries, different markets establish hydro in that, but of only a certain small scale, less than 25 megawatts, less than 30 megawatts. How do you in Ecuador look at hydro in terms of, you talked about the large scale, but what about smaller scale, and where does that fit in your definition of non-conventional?
Yeah, I mean, we have also this block here, which is small hydroelectric blocks, and those are mainly these kind of hydros, which are smaller and are not these mega projects.
You sort of distinguish between, a lot of places where to be considered under the renewable targets, that those are, 25 megawatts or less. Think about that. Now, I want to ask you a follow-on question before we get to some things related to the international market. What about distributed energy resources? So stay on this slide here, and when we talk about the expansion plan of generation for Ecuador, a lot of what's going on in other marketplaces, and the Institute of the Americas is based in California, where there's been an enormous amount of distributed energy, largely rooftop solar distributed generation that's come online in the last 5 or 6 years, and it's really changed the grid and how the grid is operating. What is the government, what is the ministry doing or looking at, or the legislative body, in terms of distributed energy resources, that is small scale distributed generation?
Yeah, okay. I believe there are two ways to look at the question. First, these big projects that the government does, but then when you go into leveraging the relationship to the project private sector, then you talk about smaller projects like small hydro plants, small photovoltaic projects like 1 megawatt, and also wind farms. We are working into the regulation for these renewable energies, which are smaller blocks, and looking into ways to manage that, maybe a feed-in tariff or a tender of a smaller block, but we are working in that regulation. Up until now, we have some projects online, smaller ones that are mainly private sector based, but those are not fundamental for the national grid, and what we want to do is diversify the power generation and have more of these kind of smaller projects. Also, this small, and a thing that you have to keep in mind is, for us, it's really important that these smaller projects are competitive. So we are not really looking into subsidize small solar projects if they don't make sense from an economical and technical standpoint. So they have to be competitive, but where they make sense, for sure, we are looking into regulation to open up the electric sector, as I said, like a feed-in tariff or something like that.
So basically, there's okay. So we'll stay tuned for further developments on some of those specific aspects of policy and investment. But I did want to, before we run out of time, get to Eleodoro Mayorga's questions from Peru. And there's a couple of specific questions, and you talked a little bit about CINEA, but first internal question, and then secondarily one regarding Peru or Ecuador with cooperation in Peru. So first is the question about, is there any plan to reduce subsidies in oil products? And then secondarily, or the next question is, how cooperation between Ecuador and Peru is developing under the new administration, relatively new administration in Ecuador. Gas imports, use of Peru pipeline for production expected in the Reorientation, and then you talked a little about CINEA, so I don't think we need to go back there unless there's anything else you want to add to that. So first, subsidies. Second, cooperation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Peru and Ecuador are countries that have complementary experiences. If you look at Peru, they are really developed. They have a really developed mining sector and a developing hydrocarbon sector. And Ecuador has a developed hydrocarbon sector and a developing mining sector. So we can share lessons learned, and we are starting to articulate with the Ministry of Energy in Peru, talk with our counterparts and see in ways to work together. We have, for example, are looking into ways to import gas from the gas fields from Peru for this Machala generation. That would be a touch point in our cooperation. And we are also in the early stages of talking into ways where we can take the crude from the Suroriente through the Peruvian pipeline. All these cooperations depend mainly on things like the price and the availability of the infrastructure that Peru has and that Ecuador has. But for sure, we are increasing the ties with Peru. We are looking into ways to enhance the cooperation between both countries, and we have some commitments where we have to work together to see where can we collaborate and generate value add for our citizens. Regarding subsidies, we have reduced the subsidies. We have taken out the subsidies of the gasoline of 92 octanes, which is called super. And we have increased the price of diesel for the shrimp farms and also for the fishers. But we haven't made subsidies tema is always a difficult one, and we are looking into ways to talk with the stakeholders in the economy and seeing ways where we can reduce subsidies and maybe compensate them in another way that makes more sense for the economy and safeguards the interests of the more vulnerable sector of the population. So, but we have reduced it in the past month, and we are also looking into further reductions, which makes sense and which doesn't affect the economy and it doesn't affect the people that are less fortunate.
Is the grand challenge of striking the appropriate balance between targeted subsidies and of course, you know, reducing the fiscal drag that subsidies always cause for governments. So best wishes with that. There's certainly no magic wand, as we all know. We're almost out of time, so I wanted to thank Jose Antonio again for his time and apologies for a couple of connection problems, but we got through it and there was a great deal of information. And just to reiterate, we will absolutely be sharing this presentation with everyone. We'll make this available. We'll have PDF available online, and Jackie will send out the link. We'll also be making available the presentation, the audio recording of the presentation, so including some of obviously the question and answer portion of this presentation. Thank you all so much for your participation today and the variety of questions. And let me just go back and apologies but back to some of the upcoming programs that we have, and just be sure to mark your calendars for next week in Costa Rica, September 25th, and we have the webinar with CFE. And we also have coming up October 4th, another webinar. October 9th, we're doing a program in Mexico on social license to operate, a very important topic. And then we'll be working in Colombia and organizing a couple of different roundtables. So thank you very much again to everyone for joining us. Jose Antonio, we appreciate this. We look forward to continuing our engagement from the Institute of the Americas with the ministry and yourself and Minister Perez. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you, Jacqueline Sanchez, for managing the back end and keeping us rolling with our webinar series. Stay tuned for all of the announcements from the Institute of the Americas. Thanks again, Jose Antonio.
Jeremy, thank you very much for the openness that the Institute has shown. And we are looking also forward to enhancing our ties with the international community and with yourself, and looking into other touch points where we can work together. So thank you all for taking your time into hearing some of the changes in Ecuador, and we are always welcoming of new respectable counterparties that want to work in our country in the benefit of their citizens and their companies also, and shareholders. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and anytime we can make an update of this.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.